Good morning, everybody, and today's sermon is entitled The Risk Factor. The church has a yearly calendar pinned to the office notice board, and John marks out various events that are happening through the year. It's orderly, planned, and it helps us to work out what we have to do and when, because as leaders, we're not that organised really, and we forget everything. You've probably noticed that we have to do belated birthdays and anniversaries, but that's because we keep messing it up and forgetting. So most things get written down on either the notice board or the whiteboard. On the whiteboard, we have who's preaching on what Sunday. We have notes on emails that have to be sent and letters that need to be answered, and anything else important like bills that have to be paid. On the big calendar, we have to plan Easter, the Summer Kids Club, Autumn Conference, Harvest celebrations, and I start planning Christmas at Crossroad by mid-September. I know it's a bit early, but I plan everything down to the tiniest detail, even the last candle, and I really, really love it. And then when the first Sunday in December comes around, everything is up, everything is sparkly and gorgeous, and Christmas has officially started. Then 2020 happened and everything changed. Any plans we made were now null and void. Conferences were cancelled, meetings were cancelled, and clubs were stopped, and the door was firmly locked. We rushed around in our car trying to make sure that everyone had some contact details and knew that there would be an online service. And then, like you, we locked down and waited to see what would happen. Now, on the outside, I was calm, I was still smiling, and I was still coping. I adjusted my daily routine to include shopping for other people that were shielding and only being allowed out once a day with our dog. And I planned a multitude of DIY projects to keep me sane. I've only got one room left in the whole house to do. John says I'm a doer. I am. He also says if I don't have a project to focus on, I'm a pain to live with. He's probably right. But as time has gone on and the current situation lurches from one unknown to another, it's easy to get sucked into despondency, to lose focus on the things that really matter, and to miss what God is calling us to do. So this morning, I want to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 11, the whole thing, and I'm going to be reading from the Message. Be generous. Invest in acts of charity. Charity yields high returns. Don't hoard your goods, spread them around, be a blessing to others. This could be your last night. When the clouds are full of water, it rains. When the wind blows down a tree, it lies where it falls. Don't sit there watching the wind, do your own work. Don't stare at the clouds, get on with your life. Just as you'll never understand the mystery of life forming in a pregnant woman, so you'll never understand the mystery at work in all that God does. Go to work in the morning and stick to it until evening, without watching the clock. You never know from one moment to another how your work will turn out in the end. The first verses talk about who we should be to our neighbours. We should be generous, caring, giving and charitable, ready to help out. If we've got a lot, we should be sharing it and being a blessing to other people, not hoarding it for ourselves, but blessing other people with what we have. If we're good at planning, we've invested well and we have plenty in the storehouse, then give well too. But sometimes no amount of planning can prepare us for some things that are thrown right at us. Even if you are a control freak and have everything planned and sorted, there are some things we just cannot control or plan for. Verses 3 and 4 in this chapter talk about the clouds forming and then it suddenly rains, or the wind blowing and bringing down a tree and it just lays where it's fallen. But it goes on to say, don't sit there and watch the clouds. Don't ponder over how bad things are and worry about our schedules and our plans being scuppered. Get on with our life. If our personal security, stability and happiness all depend on our daily routine not getting interrupted, then we're in big trouble, really big trouble. As Christians, we are called not to comfort, although we're called to comfort others, but we're not supposed to yearn for comfortable lives. That was never promised to us. I used to work with a woman who had OCD. Everything on her desk had a place. The coaster she put her coffee on was at a perfect angle to the desk corner, and she had her ruler and her pencil in one place and her desk tidy in another, an in tray that was shuffled and orderly, and she had a daily routine that I had to follow, otherwise it upset her. I'm not much of a routine person. I'm a creative and messy one too, and I like what I like. We all do. We all have things that we do that make us feel in control and everything's all right. Maybe it's something as simple as making the bed in the morning. It has to be done because you like to get into a nicely made bed at night. Otherwise it makes you feel unsettled. Or perhaps you like your coffee a certain way. Not too milky, not too strong. No sugar, 3 sugars, not too hot. Add some cold water. We like things how we like things. Imagine if I came into your house and rearranged everything. I put your clothes in a different drawer. I moved your sofa right across the room and changed the kitchen around to suit me and my cooking style. Or I reordered your shed or workshop and I moved the tools, or decided to respray your car a different colour, maybe a nice hot pink. You wouldn't like it and I wouldn't either. We like things how we like things. We like how we have always done things too, and change is always hard. One of the things that God is trying to remind us is that in these verses, life is not predictable. And when something comes at us that is unexpected or worrying, we need to handle it His way and not our way. Verse 5 tells us we don't fully understand how a human is formed inside a pregnant woman. Well, we may know a little bit more now perhaps than they did back in Bible days, but it's still largely a mystery. There are some things that only God knows, and they will always stay like that, because we're not supposed to know everything. We are called to live by faith, not by fear. And sometimes when we have to have things how we have to have things, it's because we're fearful, not faith-filled. No matter how much we think we know, we actually don't. And some things we will not find out until we get to heaven. Rarely do I take risks. I don't know if it's the way I was brought up to be sensible and calculated in my decisions, or if it's in my genes. But this time last year, I abseiled from the Fourth Rail Bridge in Scotland. I'd never done anything like it before, and when I agreed to do it on behalf of Christian Solidarity Worldwide, I didn't really have much of a clue what I was signing up for. I knew it was going to be a challenge, but I was excited because I hadn't done anything challenging in years. Nothing at all. I got married, that's definitely a challenge, and having children definitely spices up your prayer life. But when it came to it, do you know what the biggest challenge for me was? Getting on a plane and flying to Scotland. I am terrified of flying. I cry on aeroplanes in front of people. I am that scared. I flew to Nicaragua with Dick many years ago, and he had to pray and intercede for me because on the plane I was crying and freaking out. These days they'd just arrest me and throw me off the plane, so I knew that in order to get to Scotland and do the abseil, I would have to pull it together. A week before I was due to fly out with John and the rest of the family, I prayed and I asked God to help me because I was feeling worried sick about the flight. Abseiling was not the issue. Getting on the plane and not being claustrophobic was. So God's answer to my prayer was to play songs to me when I woke up in the morning, almost like playing a game with me. You know how you distract children when they've fallen over and they hurt their knee, and you sing a silly song or you tell them a funny story? Well, that's what he decided to do with me. Every morning leading up to the flight, I had a song in my mind when I woke up in the morning, And they weren't Christian songs, they were pop songs. So on the first morning I woke up singing Promised You a Miracle, which is by a band called Simply Minds. I'm not a fan of theirs, but I woke up singing their song. This made me laugh. I'm assuming God was not saying that I had a simple mind, or maybe he was, and this was the best way to communicate with me. But he was promising me a miracle. On day 2, I woke up singing Close to You by the Carpenters. Did Jesus the Carpenter want to get close to me, or was I making this all up in my simple mind? On day 3, I was zipping up my boots, going back to my roots by Odyssey. Odyssey is a spiritual journey, that's what it means. So I started to really listen to God now because I'd been so obsessed with my fear of flying that I was missing something potentially much more important. God wanted me to do the abseil. He wanted me on that flight too because he had so much more for me to do, and I'd been so bound in fear of flying that he couldn't move me on. On day 4, I was excited to find out what the song was and to see what he had for me, and he didn't disappoint me. Do the Walk of Life was playing in my head by Dire Straits. Even when I felt like I was in dire straits and I couldn't get out of this stupid abseil and flying to Scotland thing, God wanted me to walk through it with him, because if I didn't, I was going to miss out. I was going to miss out on what he had for me in the future. So by sticking to what I liked and not taking any risks, it meant that I wouldn't see what he had for me. Day 5's song was It's a Miracle by Boy George, and I woke up singing that bit that goes, you never know who you might meet. So I don't know who I'm going to meet, but I just know God put those songs in my heart. The songs stopped in Scotland because I didn't need them anymore. God didn't need to bandage my scraped knee and sing songs to me because I got on the plane. I held John's hand and I trusted for the miracle, and I got it. The second part of verse 5 in Ecclesiastes 11 says, so you'll never understand the mystery at work in all that God does. We are not supposed to know everything. We are supposed to trust in God in everything. Taking a risk with God is stepping out in faith and letting go of the fear that ties us up in knots. The final part of this chapter says this: go to work in the morning and stick to it until evening without watching the clock. You never know from moment to moment how your work will turn out in the end. We know that God has planned in advance for us things to do. Some of those things are going to be challenging, but other things will seem ordinary and everyday. Going to work or being at home. If this is where God has placed us, then he will still use us for his plans if we are willing to bend and be a bit more flexible and accepting of his ideas. We might have to put our daily routine on hold or ditch them completely in order to accommodate what God is asking of us. I don't know about you, but I don't want a mediocre Groundhog Day kind of life. You know the movie Groundhog Day? It's the same day that gets repeated over and over and over again. It's a good movie and it's funny, but if that's all that life was about, then we would die of boredom. I want to be surprised by the Holy Spirit. I want him to take control of my life and make it the best it can be for as long as I am here. God might be asking you to take a risk and trust him. Maybe he's been nudging you about something for a while, and in your heart you know it's him, but you've pretended that it isn't just because you think maybe it's my own thoughts and it's not such a good idea anyway. You know, it's safer to take the risk and trust God than to turn him down and to do your own thing or go back to the status quo. God says that we don't know the future, but we can know him. He says we need to get on with our lives and stop looking at the clouds because he's in control. He knows the hang-ups we have. He knows why we keep saying no, but he's got this. If God is calling you to step out, then don't let fear hold you back and frighten you into submission. I don't know what he has for my future, but I'm up for it. Are you? Take the risk that God is right and wait to hear what song He plays in your heart.